here. So first up, I'm just going to make something a little bit more interesting to model or to texture. So yeah, take a few minutes just to model something that you want to play with. I'm going to make, I think, a bottle. Control or, add a bunch of loop cuts. Control or, and then mouse wheel up and down, add a bunch. And better get my zoom it. Here we go. Right. So my bottle's obviously going to balloon out at the bottom and then shrink up at the top. And I could adjust all these loops separately, but I'm going to use soft selection just to do a quick little grab of the loop at the bottom here. Let's say about here. Loop all the way around and turn off soft selection or proportional editing as known in here. Soft selection is 3D Studio Max. I'm having 3D modeling flashbacks to 2005. Sorry, proportional editing. No, let's turn it on. So what it does is it gives an area of effect. So with it off, if I scale up, it just scales up that loop on its own. Turn it on, and now we have an area of effect. So we're ballooning around it. This circular area of effect we can grow or shrink while we're in this mode by using our mouse wheel up and down. And it is dependent on our position, how close we are to it as well. So if I'm much further away and I scale, that area of effect is going to take up more. So anyway, I'll just scale this up, add a bit of ballooning. And while you're scaling, you can press X to lock into just the X axis, Y to just the Y, Z to just the Z. I'm going to scale on the X and Y, but not the Z. So I'm going to press Shift Z. And it's only those two axes. So Shift Z excludes the Z axis. Shift Y excludes the X, or excludes the Y. Okay, ballooning out. Then I'll shrink it at the top as well for the mouth of the bottle. Alt and click. S, Shift Z. So while it's in proportional, if we press S or move, S, we use the mouse wheel up or down. There might be a key binding as well. Let me try to figure it out. Control and minus maybe. No, it's just scroll up or down to make the area bigger or smaller. Make a width. Oh yeah. Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. Like something like this, I wouldn't have. That would have taken me quite a while to shrink all of these into a nice line, and it's just got a nice automatic fall off. Hey. And then for the base, I'm just going to add a little bit, another extrusion down, and scale that in ever so slightly. Okay, so there is my simple bottle. I will call it bottle. Now we can't see how that looks with the modifier subdivision surface. Maybe it'll make it a nice smooth bottle. Maybe it'll oversimplify it. I'm just going to add the mod, see how that affects it. Subdivision surface. It looks okay. A bit clownish. It actually looks more like a bowling pin now. Oh well. Week 8. Ay, ay, ay. And just by adding bevels on those edges, you can add a bit more definition. And if you're annoyed by seeing the subdivided version, you can always turn this effect off in the edit mode, just with this switch off right here. And just see what the actual base mesh is. So that's what I'm actually modeling, and then we see the result underneath. Yeah. There's also a multi-resolution, which gives you a bit more control between modeling mode and sculpt modes. Works very similar. If I add the modifier multi-res, multi-resolution. Sometimes it's a little bit cleaner, and I tend to use that if we're using like displace modifiers rather than subdivision. Subdivide, and very similar. Okay, so that's going to act as our model. I think the scale might be huge. Let's take a measure. Yes, this is a 6 meter tall bottle. So that's huge, huge, huge. So really, if we're going for real world scale, and this matters if we're trying to get the lighting right, then how much of a meter is a bottle? Maybe half a meter? Less? A third of a meter? I've never thought. Yeah, which is 12 inches, which is how many centimeters? 30 centimeters? Okay. Yeah, so about 0.3? Or is it 0.03? Oh, that's a zero. I put in 0.3. All right, so let's put it in real world scale and just shrink that down. I'm going to scale down to my 3D cursor because it's right down there. Transform pivot point, 3D cursor. And then just get my scale. I can scale down to that point. Whoa. Yeah. Oh yeah, I probably should scale in edit mode actually. Be better. Yeah, it's got a base size. But we can scale in object mode and then apply the scale. Because right now it's showing my scale, my object scale of 0.181. If I scale it down, get it down, there it is, about 0.3 of a meter, proper. Now it's at 0.070. I can apply these transforms and make it a scale of 111. So in Unity, it'll read it properly. So yeah, good point. Yeah, so my scale is right now at 0.070, which is quite small. I'm going to apply these transforms to it by going to Object, Apply. And I can say all transforms or just scale. I'll say all transforms. Control A, apply. And once I do that, you'll see the scale is 111, location 000. Everything's fine. Okay, so let's add some materials to this one. And I'm going to go over to the shading window, shading tab to do this, where we can find our node editor. So the node editor works like an engine. Things are wired left to right, and all it is a more visual representation of this panel, our material panel right down here. So anything we change or add in here gets updated in the node editor. So if I change the name of this material to bottle material, in the material preview, it's updated over here as well. It's the same material we're editing. If I change the color, it's going to modify over here as well. And if we're adding image textures to it, to our base color, for example, then that's going to create the nodes necessary in the node editor. So if I add that image texture here on my base color, you can see there is an image texture node all connected up and wired. This has all been happening behind the scenes while we've been working with this. The controls in here are the same as in the main editor space. G to move things around, X to delete nodes, and Shift A to add new objects, or in this case, new shader nodes. So let's add a couple of new shaders and see how they look. So going to shader, you can see there is our list. Diffuse, emission, glass, glossy, holdout, mix, principled, refraction, so principled BSDF and principled volume. One is for surface and one is for volume. And refraction, subsurface scattering, which is for skin. That color, if you ever shine a light up to your hand and you can see the red through it, that is the subsurface color of your skin shining through. Translucent and transparent, almost similar. So any of these can be added and wired up. If I add a diffuse, I'm going to add a diffuse, an emission, and a glass. I'm going to add these three. Why not? Shader, diffuse, shader, emission, shader, glass. I'll make diffuse red, emission blue, glass green. in order to wire these up, all of this is reading from left to right to our output, which is what we see on the model. So right now you can see the principal BSDF, bidirectional scattering distribution function. If anyone ever asks you at a party for a cool fact, BSDF, it's all about how light is red. And we can just wire these new shaders up to the output. We can even remove this entirely by disconnecting, like so. Disconnecting the noodle, and now you can see there's no surface. We can't see it at all. And if I wire up my diffuse to the surface, now we can see diffuse color appearing on it. If I wire up my emission, it's going to take over that slot, and now it's emitting color. Harder to see in this view. If I change to, yeah, I'll just add another surface underneath here so you can see the emission. And all windows being modular, I'll make my timeline a shader editor as well, so I can jump back and forth and see this. So the emission actually is emitting light. But due to the render settings in Eevee, it's probably harder to see because we don't have ray tracing on by default. So let's take a look at our render settings real quick. Render. By default, we have Eevee as our renderer. If we go right down, we can see ray tracing is turned off. This is how Eevee is now handling its emissive stuff as well as reflections. So inside of the render settings, I'm just going to turn on ray tracing to make sure it's working. Enable ray tracing right here. And that's going to benefit with our reflections and stuff like that, as well as this light transfer stuff. So the second I turn on, now you can see there is light being cast onto that surface. Ray tracing, iRay, it's the same thing that's used in Substance Painter for its render engine as well. So good idea to turn it on for your renders. So it's in the render properties. It's over here. No ray tracing on your version? Okay. So screen space reflections. That is what they called ray tracing in the previous version of what they shaded. This is the same thing you also have bloom, which is an effect I miss. You can make things glow like neon lightsabers. I think 4.2. I know. Yeah. Anyway. You can also check out how things are looking in Cycles, the slightly better rendering engine as well. I switch that over and you can see the light transfer is much nicer because it's a fully ray traced engine. Yes, it's longer to render, and they're getting closer and closer with Eevee to replicating what Cycles can do. And also Eevee is more representative of the game engine, but if you want some nice beauty renders, like proof of concept, Cycles, definitely, yeah. Just takes a little bit longer. Okay, and then we have glass, of course. I drop glass in there, and I see a sort of glassy texture. So again, there's another setting for Eevee that needs to change before we can... Oh, I'm still measuring things. Oops. And just in our material properties, and basically again it's another ray tracing setting to turn on, and it might be slightly different in your version. Just turn on ray trace transmission to help with transparency. You can also enable transparent shadows. So again, that setting, ray trace transmission in the material properties, dithered. If I turn it off, you'll notice there's a good approximation of transparency. We can see our shape through it being refracted. Turn it off, and you see it's kind of a dull blob. Yes, slightly different. Yes. Oh yes, you also have blend mode. Turn off the blend. Maybe not off the blend. I don't know. Yeah, there we go. Slightly, yeah. I think that version of transparency looks better. Anyway. So the other thing the node editor lets us do is chain these different things together. We could combine any of these shaders together. We can mix them by using a mix shader. So I'm just going to add another shader here. Add shader, mix shader. And then I'm just going to drop this onto the noodle right here, and it's going to wire itself in. So I have a glass shader in slot 1, and in the second slot, I can pick any of these other ones. I'll just wire in. I'll wire in the emission, a mixture between emission and glass. A very strong emission. Let's go back to 1. And now it's kind of a glowing blue glass bottle. The factor in the middle here, that's the balance between shader 1 and shader 2. So here it's 50-50, 50% between the two. If I slide that over to the left, it'll go to shader 1, which is glass. If I slide it fully to the right, we go to full emissive material. So for example, if you wanted to make a ceramic, you maybe want to have a glossy material mixed with a diffuse. The ceramic is kind of rough underneath with a gloss on top. Then we would use a diffuse, and I'll just unwire I'll unwire both of them. So now nothing is output on the model, just the shadow. I'll say diffuse color. And now I get a kind of nice balance between that shine and that diffuse. So fully kind of metallic gray with the gloss there, which is a little bit too much. Then you can bring that down halfway, and you kind of warm maybe a little bit more into the diffuse. Get more of a ceramic texture. Let's see how this looks with shade smooth. Yeah, looking a little bit more ceramic when I smooth off the vertices versus shade flat. And now I'm just right clicking, shade smooth. To undo. Oh no, just right click again and go back to shade flat. Yes.
Is doing that, does that actually change the shader itself, or is that just like a viewport thing that wouldn't export if you try to export the model into Unity or something?
I think there would be issues bringing the node setup definitely wouldn't come in Unity, so we'd probably have to bake any of these kind of effects. With glossiness, we'd have to probably redo it using Unity shaders because they do have glossiness values. But Blender being what it is, I wouldn't be surprised if there's not a community add-on for migrating direct to
So then
Unity.
what about, like you said, you were just changing better to
Hmm.
shade smooth versus shade
Oh yeah, that's standard in all 3D things. Yeah, we can set that up in Unity to shade smooth. I'm not sure if we turned on, if we like export the FBX, it would remember to shade smooth. It sounds like it would, but yeah, that is something we can enable in Unity, definitely.
I was just gonna ask, how do you mix, how do you define which one like goes on top? Like you said,
Hmm.
like with ceramic, there's kind of an underlayer of roughness, and then like gloss goes on top.
Hmm.
So in the mix shader, is it like is one
In certain instances, the order you put them in does matter. Like if you're multiplying an effect on top of one, then the order would matter. In this case, it's literally just the balance is controlled by this factor. So it's whichever shader is on top is the one that's favored to the left here. So if I slide to the left here, I'm going to give more to the diffuse. If I slide to the right, I'll give more to the glossy. And I'll even make these extreme colors so we can see. Oh, that's a nice effect. So fully green to fully purple, go all the way over to the left, fully green, all the way over to the right, fully purple gloss, and then somewhere in the middle.
By the way, you know, for the mech assignment, how you said it doesn't necessarily have to be a combat mech. It could be
Yeah.
you know a worker or a
Yeah.
like a purpose mech.
Yeah, it could be an ice cream mech.
Yeah, I was actually thinking.
Halt, citizen, chocolate chip or rum raisin. No, anyway.
But I was wondering if the idea for the mech I'm making is it's an arcade cabinet. So the arcade cabinet makes up the torso and head, and then it has a like arms and legs that have like controllers, like insets for controllers. To
Yes.
slot in.
Yeah.
Would that be okay for like the head and
Yeah.
body of the mech to be like made up by this augmented?
Sounds like a literal PlayStation.
I was wondering if that would like fit within the parameters.
Yeah, of course. It's a robot. It's a robot and it's got a theme to it, which I like. So you can expand, like the fact that you're going with an arcade cabinet, you've got a lot of things to look at, like the real wood build cabinets, the analog buttons, and the way you can fit it in. Of course. Yeah.
Alright, I was just wondering
Yeah.
if it'd be like considered, I don't know, cheating that you're using a real world object as a reference for the torso and head.
No. Not cheating at all. No, I was doing some real world research into this last night because there's real world mechs being built right now. I nearly made a slideshow for you, but I didn't. But I don't know if you've seen the current state of assisted walkers. Like, that's the legit, it's for people with disabilities can stand up and walk around. This is built by Toyota, I believe. What's interesting is how much it is informed by sci-fi. They're looking at, like, they've designed it clearly thinking about sci-fi. Sci-fi has informed design in a weird way.
It is giving
But was in
vibes of like aliens, like you know the
Yeah.
second Aliens movie, the number one Owen Ripley's in the
I do.
construction mech.
Well, they were on the money apparently. Yeah, it's just interesting with the amount of space you have to give things. Like, it can't be like the Iron Man suit, everything's sleek and form fitting, because no, this is the real world. We need the engine to be able to lift a man. We need the mechanics to exist. And there's no battery because that battery would be way too heavy at this stage. It's a wired mech at this stage in time. But it's very interesting the videos you can see of him walking around and using this. And just the very pragmatic and practical control systems, the way they would be put in there. They're very interesting. Plus the original early days mechs of like people figuring this out. This is like I think in the 60s, someone trying to build a mech suit. Again, always informed by sci-fi. We see sci-fi films and we try and build what we see. And then crazy examples of what adding machines could be. It's a coal powered robot for making paper trades. I'm not sure. It's a steam powered gentleman and the mechanical horse. So we've been thinking about robotics and how shapes. So yeah, it doesn't have to be. It can be based on real world stuff, of course, because that's what we've always thought about this. Like the initial way that we sold cars was like comparison, because people can't buy things without comparison, and they're like, why would I buy this car? And it's like, it's 50 horsepower. It's worth 50 of your horses. I'm like, oh, well then, 50 horses. So yeah, comparison, mix, that kind of thing. Anyway, there's my slideshow I didn't intend to have. Where were we? Oh yes, so mix shader, outputs. Yes. Hmm. No, we haven't touched on it. So, yeah.
And it was like parts of it were like a bit like I probably wasn't understanding.
Now noise. So if I wire back up my principled BSDF, actually no, I don't need to do it. So noise gets into our generated texture stuff, which is all very, very interesting. And yeah, you can get some very complicated shaders put together with generated textures. So our generated list are in texture right here. So image sequences, multiple images, but we have brick, checker, environment, which is HDRI. Actually, I have a HDRI I can show you. Gradients, IS, image, yada, 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 yada. So noise and Voronoi and magic, these are just generated kind of random ones that we can, yeah, like dust and scratches in surf substance is using a lot of noise textures and things like that. So if I add a noise texture in here, one thing I haven't talked about is the color of these nodes gives you an indication of where you can connect them. So yellow color can connect to yellow color. Green shader can connect to green shader nodes. So I know I can connect this noise texture color up to my color of my diffuse.
Yeah, that was the thing I kind of
and now you can see it's generating a noise pattern on top of it. Random colors, up and down, we can change the scale or detail of it. And the roughness and smoothness of it. So, and the way we would use noise is in something like this. We're developing a fog shader, and we needed to have parts of the volume on or off. We could use volume and noise to control that. So this is a shader setup for a volume shader, which we can create. I'll just show you what it actually creates. So here is a simple without the noise texture fog on Eevee, just a camera move and a couple of 2D assets put through. You can see there's a layer of fog on the ground and there's a vampire in the fog. So that's without the noise texture adding the detail of on or off volume. You see it's just a pure volume shader.
Is that applied to the camera or is it?
No, it's applied to a cube. So if I add a cube in here actually. Mesh, cube, there it is. I'll add a new shader to it. The simple fog is incredibly easy to create. Extra deletes. I'll just add a shader principled volume. Add it to volume. And there is some fog. And then the density is right here. Up or down, you have a cube of fog. A ghost. So that's incredibly easy. The more difficult one is just to add the extra shaders, and this is where shaders become powerful. Back here. Here's the same camera move, but with the noise texture added to this fog, and then some color adjustments. So So you can also animate the movement of the noise, so it's rolling fog, and yeah, a little bit dense. But that noise adds all that detail to the volume. And I've included that shader setup there, so you can put it together yourself if you wanted. 2 shaders, in fact. This other one is for the world's background setup, the star field, which again, you see the stars in the background. It's like a HDRI, but it's procedural generated stars, and they move and turn with the camera. So world shader and fog shader completed in there. And we're in the shader editor here. If we want to look at the world nodes, we can just go over to world. So up top here, change to world. And anything we wire up to the world output is going to be like our HDRI, our background that appears. If I change the color, that's going to change the color of my background and also the ambient lighting of the world. If I go ahead and wire up another one of these generated textures, like let's say a checker texture, suddenly we're in a world of checker. I had a brick texture, suddenly I'm in a world of bricks. And whenever we add into the world, that's going to inform the lighting in our scene. The world is giving it ambient lighting. And then this is also where we'd apply HDRI maps as well, environment textures. So if we add a texture, environment texture, we can add a HDRI in here. Clouds. And did I include that HDRI? I did not. So I just added the HDRI up there as well, if you wanted to use it. The pure sky. Okay. So time to do the Substance Painter stuff and taking a model from Substance into here and using the node editor. So I'm going to open up my model from last week in Substance. I've included that on Brightspace if you don't have a model to work with. First Axe Substance Painter file. Yep. So yeah, the original axe had no textures when we brought it in. And then first axe. Oh yes, this is what I wanted to say. So we talked about baking textures, but we didn't actually bake our textures in Substance Painter, and sometimes you have to do that for things to translate, especially if you're using things like ambient occlusion, where it's baking lighting into your texture. You need to bake them before they leave Substance Painter because, as Dylan was pointing out, sometimes things in one software won't translate to another, so things in Blender don't look the same in Unity. We want things in Substance Painter to look exactly the same when we export them out, exactly the same in Blender and the exact same in Unity. So baking the lighting, baking the textures can ensure that. It is a bit of a cheat, but when it's in game, you really won't notice the difference. So here's my whiplash from being in Blender. Okay, so there's my model, still set up for these 3 different mats. And then I have a bunch of filters that I put on, the ambient occlusion, the curvature, and we can take a look at those as different channels. So there's my base color, all applied in Substance. The metallic. So why is the blade white and why is the handle black for the metallic channel? The blade is metal and the other stuff isn't. So only this will be included in the metallic shiny channel. The normal for bump. So not much detail apart from on the handle. The height, so normal and height kind of do the same thing. I tend to pick normal map over height map. And there's no detail on that one. And then we can see things like the world space normal. Yeah, so there it's unwrapped. Ambient occlusion layer. Oh, not much going on because I haven't baked it. So we'll come back to that when I baked the texture. You can see there's no ambient occlusion. Curvature, again, I haven't baked it, so I can't see that curvature. And then things like position, which just gives you like readout on position in the world. And opacity, yeah, everything's full opacity, nothing transparent. All right. So to export from Substance Painter, we just export as FBX, file, export mesh. And this is without baking it. I'm going to export the mesh. Actually, baking won't matter to the mesh. FBX Substance X. First X, FBX. Easy, no problem. No errors in the log. That part, fine. Once I export the textures, I need to make some decisions about which ones I want to export. So generally you want the base color, the metallic, the normal, and the ambient occlusion to be the most important, but we can export all of them just to show what's going to come up. Export textures. It'll tell me where it's going to export to. And the output templates, AO, yeah, normal, very good. And then for each one of these, I can select which I want to export. Yeah, I'd keep the normal DirectX and not the other normal. And I'll lose the height map, I don't need that. I'll do that for all 3 of these. Normal and height. Normal and height. So there's basically two normals. One is the OpenGL and one is DirectX. Actually, no, Blender likes the OpenGL version. I've got that backwards. Okay, and then I just export all of these. Yeah, good catch. Thank you. Yeah, all right, we're all good. Export these, and there we go. Yada, yada, yada. But we have something in the log that is a problem. I can take a look first at my output. open output directory, and there are my individual meshes all exported, looking good. I've got base color for each one of these, metallic, normal, roughness, base. Yeah, and the metallic black and white is of course important for saying which is metallic and which is not. Which is all good, but I couldn't get my ambient occlusion because I hadn't baked my mesh. And in the log, it's telling me just that. Mixed AO, ambient occlusion, can't be available. It has no ambient occlusion channel or the mesh map. It does have a channel, I just haven't baked it, so it hasn't created it. So to export with these errors fixed, they're basically all saying that the ambient occlusion can't work because we haven't baked the textures. We need to bake our textures. So up here, we have another mode, bake mesh maps. A little croissant. And then we're going to go back through the channels and you'll see the difference once I bake these. So you can decide on which ones we want to bake. I'm just going to leave things at standard. Of course, there's a lot of settings to change. The output size, different parameters, the low poly, high poly, and we can do it for each of our different channels. But who has time for that right now? Let's just click bake. The standard will work for what we're doing, and we'll see it bake as we go. So it's cooking our texture, it's baking that lighting information into the texture maps. And then it's going to export all of these. Oh no, we have to export again, don't we? It's not going to export. Hey, we're done. Let's go back to painting mode. And you see things have gotten a little bit sharper. The light has been baked into the crevices a little bit harsher. And in fact, I might want to go back through and adjust my dirt and grime. It's a little bit heavy now. And if I go through my channels, you remember there was nothing in my curvature. I go back now, the curvature has applied depth to where there is inseam, where there is crease. Where is my ambient occlusion? There we go. Ambient occlusion as well has recorded the lighting information. And, oh, I don't know why it does. Has it done this? It has created, what do we got here? I've got a shadow baked in from something. Okay. So for that, I might need to change the lighting in my scene. Have you guys messed with the lighting in Substance Painter? Have you figured out how there is no lights? Yes, there are no lights in here. It's all this HDRI stuff. It's all through this kind of ambient lighting stuff. So over here, we have display settings, environment settings. And I cannot change these at the moment. What have I done? Oh, maybe it's because I'm in the wrong mode. Yeah, there we go. So I have to go back to full material mode. So the lighting is being handled by this environment, which right now has the opacity set all the way down. But it is giving, like that HDRI that I applied in Blender, it is actually giving lighting to the scene. And basically the only way to adjust the lighting is to rotate the scene around it. We have environment rotation. Change where it is. Change that environment blur to see which environment it is, and we can change what the standard environment we're using is to give different lighting. Rotate where it is. We can change the alignment of the camera. And basically decide where those shadows are. So this shadow is probably caused by, I'd say it's this thing being right from it. Anyway, ways of adjusting the lighting. I'm just going to turn that back off for a moment. Okay. Yeah, and there my stacks exporter is ready. So now I'm going to export these again. And again, I could go through and start playing because I think my grit and dirt is probably a little bit high. Oh my god. See, fill there, I'll be in inclusion. That's going to be there. That's going to be there. Properties, my friend, where are you? Nah. All right. Okay. Anyway, forget about that. Let's export these textures again, and this time we'll get ambient occlusion and no error messages. Yeah, just export to the same place. Maybe it'll override it for me, which would be nice. Export again, and just click export after baking. And yeah, no new error messages, all exported without error. Fantastic. Yeah, and I can see my ambient occlusion has been exported as well. Fantastic. Okay, now it's time to bring this stuff into Blender. So I'm just going to copy all of these. Axe text. So all of these to be applied. I can close this up. Yeah, sure. And I want to bring my axe into this file here. So I'll just import FBX. Let's go back to solid, or even just material preview. Gonna hide that bottle. File, import, FBX. Okay, and there's my axe imported. And then in the shader editor, it has its materials. We already set it up in Blender to have these three materials. We just need to wire up the images to them. So for the axe handle, and I'll show you the laborious way and then the very fast way of doing it first. So the laborious way, and the principle is just a nice collection of all of our diffuse metallic alphas, normals in one, rather than creating a diffuse shader, a glossy shader. We can handle most of it in here. So if I wanted the image texture, the base color in here, I just add an image texture to it. So I can draw a little noodle out here, and it's going to ask me what I want to add onto the end of it. I can say image texture, color, and then open an image texture, axe text. And this is the handle, or axe handle base color. Hey, and we have the image with baked lighting already on it, so it's lighter and darker. Similarly, we could go through the rest of these and we could say, oh, well, we have a metallic value. I have a metallic shader for that. Let's go ahead and add an image texture for that. And then open up metallic or handle metallic. And now that's plugged in there, it knows it's not metallic. Great. And we can keep going around and doing this until we populated all the parts that we need, the normal, and stuff like that. However, Blender makes it easy for us by using the Node Wrangler. Has anyone used the Node Wrangler add-on? Yeah. Party people in the house say Wrangler. Wrangler. So, the Node Wrangler, very, very useful, designed specifically for stuff like this and also to make using the Node editor easier. So what you need to do to turn it on, and please do this right now, go to your edit preferences and search in add-ons for Node. And there you should see the community add-on Node Wrangler. Just turn it on. Yeah, someone nicked all our chairs. I don't know what happened. There's going to be a problem later. I think it's a community plugin. But anyway, I just search for Node and I find it. You don't need to decide on community or official, just add-ons and then Node. Nope, once you enable it, that's it. It's already in. And we can just close and we have the Node Wrangler. So, let's delete these two nodes here. And Node Wrangler does a couple of things. So if I have an image texture, it can add texture coordinates to it very fast. Just by saying Control T. Oh yeah, and I should have pointed this out. If you roll down the Node Wrangler, you can see all of these shortcuts and hotkeys that you need to know. And what the Node Wrangler is essentially shortcuts and ways of making things work. Ways of merging nodes, adding new nodes. But the ones that are going to benefit us the most are adding the principal texture setup or adding a texture setup, because we're importing a lot of textures from Substance. So Control-Shift-T is going to be very useful in a moment. Control-T is just a fast way of adding texture coordinate nodes, let's say if you want to map things. So if I select this image texture base color and say Control-T, it automatically adds a mapping node and a texture coordinate. We can adjust the scale of this model. Say if we had a texture we want to repeat a couple of times, we can say how many times we want to repeat it and what that scale is. But that's not the magic that we need today. What we need with this principled BSDF is just to select it. And this is our OrcAxe handle. So we're going to get all the texture material for the handle. Control-Shift-T. Control-Shift-T. And I can go in and just select the handle materials, textures, not materials. OrcAxe handle, roughness, normal, mixed AO, metallic, base color. And once I say principal texture setup, bam! Our textures are set up and wired up for us automatically. We don't have to go through one by one. There's a tiny bit of setup to do with the ambient occlusion. You notice it's not wired in, so we basically need to mix those together with the base. It is the baked lighting information. Yep, so the shadow that's kind of painted on. So, I'm going to consult my notes. AO. No, yes, no, yes. Invert to noodle alpha from right. Mix overview, yeah. Nice. Okay. So for the ambient occlusion, I need to add a mixer node. mix color. So not a mix shader, a mix color. I'm going to add a mix color. I'm going to plug, in this case, the order matters. I'm going to plug the ambient occlusion into the bottom, the base color into the top slot, and the mixer into our base. So that's mixing the ambient occlusion and the base color. And does that look good? Does that look right? No. That is because our blending mode needs to be set to multiply. So I can multiply on top of each other and see that. And I might need to invert that. That might look wrong. Okay. And then I'll just do the same thing for the blade. Remember Node Wrangler, Control Shift T. How you doing, guys? Sorry, I'm teaching a class. Can you please sit down? Thank you. Okay, so principled, I just need to press Control Shift T. And that will automatically populate the principled BSDF with our image textures. So this is with the Node Wrangler enabled. If I just say Control Shift T, and this is for the blade, so all of the blade textures. Roughness, normal, mixed, metallic, base, AO. Yes, James, what's up? Yeah. It's an add-on. But it's free and it's not, yeah, it's just built for it. So Blender's totally open source, which is why it's free. Anyway, same setup for ambient occlusion, just add a mix RGB, mix color. Ambient occlusion into the bottom slot, base into the top. And change its blending mode to multiply. And then the fabric is going to be the exact same. Just get it in here. We can get rid of that normal that's already added by default. Control Shift T. And it is the fabric wrap. All of these principal texture setup. Again, add that mix color. Bottom slot for ambient occlusion. Top slot for base. And multiply. And now our axe looks pretty much identical to how it looked in Substance Painter. What's my light? Oh yeah, there's my light. So maybe I'll change this to a sun and bring that strength right down, let's say about 30. And yeah, maybe we'll take a short break and we can talk about lighting and the like. But there is the axe from Substance Painter back in. And as usual, everything recorded, so you can take a look at what I did later. For now, I think a cup of tea, a cup of coffee, and a short break would be a good idea. I'll just let you work away beyond that.